Hello there, I'm Maggie Forciero and welcome to the FeelCast. Today's topic is compassion fatigue, and to tell us more about that, I'm joined in studio by Elsabé Grotzinger, an intern clinical psychologist at Geluk Psychology Services. Elsabé, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Let's kick off. What is compassion fatigue?
Compassion fatigue is when the helper becomes tired of helping. So it is usually emotional and physical exhaustion that is caused by help. And often the helpers are exposed to trauma because of the services that they provide, like paramedics, journalists, psychologists, social workers, pastors. So when you are exposed to a lot of problem coverage, for instance, for journalists, and also if you continuously work with trauma and problems, and then it leads to a reduced ability of compassion when people don't feel the empathy that they should be feeling for working with these traumatic experiences.
Does that mean then these kinds of people, do they like lack the compassion? Does it go away?
Yeah,
And then it just like exhausts you in a kind of a way?
it exhausts you. It's actually better described as the negative cost of caring. So it doesn't mean that the empathy necessarily goes away. It is just that people are becoming really fatigued, exhausted, burned out from this exposure. So it may impact the level of empathy that they feel because of the exhaustion.
Yeah, which makes it very important, for these kind of people to actually have regular visits with psychologists.
Absolutely. And that is where self-care would come in.
Yes.
I need to be able to self-care because compassion fatigue can transcribed or it can appear as in a very negative way. So people can have different aspects like aggression, irritability, for instance.
Yes.
And as a helper, you cannot afford for a person who needs compassion not to have compassion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then what are the triggers of compassion fatigue?
The triggers can include critical care work, and as I've mentioned already, those fields where you continuously provide care
Yes.
to the community, and especially
Yes.
when there are trauma involved, like accidents, people with
Suffering and-
suffering,
yes.
death, psychological issues, community issues, etc. And it is a lack of support, high mortality rates, unable management, a lot of problems at home, a lot of challenges at work. It can be unstable management. It can be long hours. It can be constant and continuous high emotions and frustrations.
Yes.
So those can be some of the causes.
Yes, for compassion fatigue.
Yes.
And what are the signs, when one experiences compassion fatigue?
They are actually
What do you have to look
various.
for,
Yes. And it is extremely important that people listen carefully so that we recognize earlier than later when we are at risk of compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
So it would include emotional fatigue, which would be anger and irritability, as I mentioned already, irritation, a sense of hopelessness, exhaustion, not having the energy
Yes.
to like drag again. Then you have physically, can be headaches, it can be abdominal pain, hypertension. But just to go back to emotional again, that can transcribe then into anxiety, depression, which are mood disorders at the end. And PTSD, acute stress. Those are some of the common diagnoses that then would go untreated if people don't seek help.
Yeah, basically things that's happening to you that never happened to you before.
Yes.
To realize that these things are it's something new, I need to go and check it out.
Yes, absolutely. And concentration is very important. The cognition is important. So for people in the helping profession, we work with our brains. We work with information and how to address, how to react.
Yes.
So when you become fatigued, it can also put people at risk.
Yes.
But firstly, it puts you at risk also.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, it can also, affect your health and
It
all that.
affects your level of concentration,
Yes.
even your self-esteem. So you can end up having a low self-esteem because you may not feel good enough anymore.
Yes. Wow,
Yeah.
that's deep. Now, do you have any tips you'd like to share, to address compassion fatigue?
Yes, definitely practical self-care. So I often in the sessions do that self-care with patients. So breathing, people underestimate the power of breathing.
Breathing, yes.
Breathing, it stimulates the brain. It ensures that the brain gets fresh oxygen. It is to set emotional boundaries, and we will talk about that a little bit later. It is to have hobbies and actually make time for your hobbies, painting, going and just breathe in fresh air, exercise,
And also the way of breathing,
the way of
like
breathing.
where the stomach has to, expand.
And one also have to be a bit careful one, because if you want to calm down,
Yes.
there's a specific breathing, and we call it the 4+2 = 6. 4 in, 2 hold, 6 out. Now to energize is just the opposite breathing.
Oh, okay.
It is then 6
And then 4.
minus 4 and then equals 2. So it's the opposite one. So if you want to go
That's
and sleep, you
interesting.
cannot do the energizing
Yes.
breathing. And also it's to have healthy outside relationships with your family, with your friends, with your colleagues. You can keep a journal. It's to boost your bounce back, your resiliency. And it is to use positive coping mechanisms. Once again, exercising, talk, get easy help, breathing, and so on.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then in conclusion, why are boundaries important when it comes to compassion fatigue?
Setting boundaries, healthy boundaries, is a skill. So people that don't have it has to learn to say no. So setting boundaries is about learning to say no. So often we feel guilty and we keep on saying yes, 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 and that's how we become fatigued.
Yes, that's a very difficult one.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So, and we need to be comfortable with saying no. If I just say
Without feeling guilty.
exactly.
Yeah.
If I say no and I feel guilty, then I might as well give the $1,000 and get it out of the way.
Exactly.
And forget about it. But caregiving without boundaries leads to resentment, to frustration, to fatigue, and to burnout. So boundaries, then if you set boundaries, it makes caring sustainable, because then you will have energy for the next task.
Yes.
Also, boundaries prevent compassion fatigue, described as the emotional and physical erosion that takes place when helpers are unable to refuel and to regenerate. So we need to set those boundaries so that we have renewed energy for the next task.
Yes, yes.
And finally, boundaries underline, it demonstrates respect for the independence and autonomy of others.
Yes. Wow, that's deep. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Elsabé, thank you so much for joining us on the FeelCast, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's all we have for you today. Join us again next time on the FeelCast.